Good morning. Excuse my voice, but the hearing will come to order. Tactical Air and Land Forces Subcommittee meets today, our first hearing of the 116th Congress, and to review the Navy and Marine Corps' Tactical Aviation and Ground Modernization programs fiscal year. I'd like to thank the members for working with us, a change of time. We're going to try to get the bulk of this hearing in before votes come, somewhere 10 to 10:30. Subcommittee's been busy over the last couple of weeks. Briefings with military departments learned to discuss missionaries and programs related to this jurisdiction of the subcommittee. The briefings have worked well. I think we learned quite a bit, but that's the foundation of oversight of what we're going to do this Congress. We have a number of witnesses with us today, starting with Vice Admiral Matt Winter, Program Executive Officer for the F-35 Joint Program, and a very popular person, quite a bit right now. Rear Admiral Scott Kahn, Director of Air Warfare for the Chief of Naval Operations. Lieutenant General Steve Rudder, Deputy Commandant of the Aviation for the Marine Corps. Lieutenant General David Berger, Commanding General of the Marine Corps Combat Development Command, and Deputy Commandant for the Combat Development and Integration. Danielle Nago, did I get that right? It's close. Deputy Assistant Secretary for Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition for Aviation Programs. And Mr. Jimmy Smith, Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Navy for Research, Development, Acquisition, Expeditionary Programs, and Logistics Management. Yeah. First of all, General Burke, congratulations. Before we get into our formal remarks for your nominations, being the next Commandant, your shoulders will be heavy, but you stand in a long line of great leaders, and I'm sure you'll do us well and serve the country well. I also want to thank the other witnesses for your service, for certainly everything that goes on. We have quite a lengthy statement that I'm going to put into the record, but in order to save some time, I'm going to pare it down a little bit because we have quite a bit, and we want to make sure we get it finished before we move into that. But today, we're talking about the Navy and Marine Corps' plan to face a modern force, ready for challenges posed by near-peer adversaries taking shape. And this is a change based on the national defense strategies and the changes that we're going through, yet we've been in a road that was taking us down in an area that was very different from the national strategy we have now. There are a number of issues we're going to be dealing with today. The F-35 being one of them, our rotor fleet, certainly a number of issues there. What and which variants we're going to go on with the F-35, Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, the list goes on and on. But at this point, what I want to do is turn it over to my ranking member for her opening remarks, Mrs. Hartzler. Good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman. And since this is our first official hearing, even though we've had several briefings, but first hearing of the 116th Congress, I want to congratulate you on being chairman of this committee, and I look forward to working with you. We have a strong tradition of working in bipartisan fashion, and we look forward to carrying that out and doing good things for our country. So congratulations, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. As you know, we're here to talk about our Navy modernization programs. It's important because years of continuous combat operations and deferred modernization created a crisis in the military readiness in both capability and capacity. And it will take many years of increased defense budgets representing real growth in order to fully address this crisis. We cannot afford to go backwards. This level of spending in the fiscal year 20 budget request is the minimum needed to continue to repair our military and defend the country. The chairman covered several of the major areas. I briefly want to touch on a couple that I hope that you will address today. First, regarding physiological episodes in the aircraft, I'm encouraged by the progress being made as well as the amount of resources requested by the Navy in fiscal year 20, approximately $278 million in the areas of upgrading the aircraft, changes in aircrew education and training, improved maintenance practices, and bringing in the medical community to better understand the human dynamic. This needs to remain a top priority, and today's hearing is a good opportunity for the witnesses to update us on the Navy's efforts to mitigate these events in F-18 and T-45 aircraft. Second, regarding the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. The chairman mentioned this as a focus, and I would also add that we need to better understand what actions are being taken now in this budget request to lower operation and sustainment costs. To include ramping up organic depot capability, improving the Atomic Logistics Information System, or ALIS, and improving the time associated for long lead parts. The Block 4 Modernization Program, which includes hardware and software, has 66 approved requirements associated with it. The current estimated cost to complete the initial program is approximately $10 billion. The Director of Operational Test and Evaluation has indicated the schedule could be viewed as high risk due to the large amount of planned capabilities to be delivered in 6-month increments. Given the scope and complexity of this effort, we would like to hear and expect Admiral Winter you could provide us some additional details on the challenges and risks associated with this critical program. And lastly, we would expect to get an update on current efforts to improve reliability and maintainability of the aircraft, in particular for these aircraft fielded to operational squadrons. So a few things there. And there's no doubt that the capabilities the F-35 brings to the battlefield against advanced threats by peer competitors is needed to meet the goals and objectives of the National Defense Strategy. However, we all share concerns about rising F-35 operations and support costs affecting long-term affordability, which could result in lower procurement quantities in the out years. And being representing Whiteman Air Force Base, home of the B-2 bomber, I know up close and personal what that can look like, having a large amount of aircraft originally scheduled and then ending up with, now we have 20 aircraft. So the F-35 Joint Program Office, along with the military services, appear to be very focused on reducing these costs, and we look forward to working with each of you and industry in a collaborative manner to reach your objectives. And lastly, regarding aviation readiness and strike fighter inventories, it's my understanding that the Navy continues to take risk in its management of the strike fighter inventory and has an identified shortfall of 54 aircraft, which amounts to 1 carrier air wing. We need to better understand what impacts this has to overall readiness and what we can do to improve the situation from a modernization standpoint. So thank the chairman for organizing this hearing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Hartzler. And cost is obviously a major consideration. Obviously, you have to weigh the risk, and that's your job, and a very difficult one at that. But we're also looking at the supply chain, and if you just open up the newspaper or look at online, Turkey and part of that supply chain for F-35 is going to factor in quite a bit, and we expect to hear about that today. And we've had a little change of the lineup, as I understand it, but we're going to start Mr. Nago, and we're going to start with you, and then we'll work down the line with Admiral Winter, and because some of your testimony is going to be presented jointly. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you. Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, and distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to update you on the Department's fiscal year 2020 Naval Aviation programs. I'm joined today by Lieutenant General Stephen Rudder, Deputy Commandant for Aviation, and Rear Admiral Scott Kahn, Director of Air Warfare. We would like to thank Congress for your support for the timely enactment of the fiscal year 19 budget. Receipt of the FY19 authorization and appropriation without a CR increased our acquisition efficiency. As GAO reported to you in February of 2018, continuing resolutions result in uncertainty, complicated operations, and inefficiencies. This year's timely enactment enabled the Naval Air Systems Command to obligate 41% of its O&M budget, 3 times the rate compared to FY18 to date, obligate 71% of planned depot inductions, 5 times the rate of FY18, and obligate 29% of fleet support team funding, twice the rate of FY18. The teams were also able to clear the backlog of contracting actions and, most importantly, improved our ability to support the fleet. Our FY20 budget requests aligns to the personnel, capabilities, and processes needed to implement the Navy Marine Corps contribution to the National Defense Strategy, where great power competition is the central challenge to the prosperity and security of the United States. A resurgent Russia and rapidly growing and more aggressive China continue their aims to displace American influence in critical regions around the globe. To regain and expand our competitive advantage, it is imperative that we adapt to this changed national security environment and do so with both a sense of urgency and enduring resolve. Great power competition against capable challengers will not fade over 1 or 2 budget cycles. We need your support over the long run as we face risks to our economic, technological, and national security. To do this requires the right balance of readiness, capability, and capacity underpinned by stable and predictable budgets. The lethality which naval aviation brings to bear in support of our nation's interest is at the forefront of this challenge. As such, we request your continued support for both our ongoing readiness initiatives and the investment in the development of new and advanced capabilities. Mr. Chairman, our FY 2020 investments are focused, balanced, and prioritized to deliver a ready, capable, sea-based, and expeditionary force. To better enable the best use of our requested investments, we continue to transform our business practices and evolve our acquisition and contracting strategies to maximize the output of every taxpayer dollar. Leveraging the vision and acquisition authorities provided by the Congress, we're working to become more agile to deliver relevant capability at speed and at scale. To improve readiness, we are leveraging commercial tool sets and best practices by making fundamental changes to the processes by which we plan and execute naval aviation sustainment activities. We thank you for the strong support this subcommittee has always provided to our sailors and Marines, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. We look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Winter.
Good morning, Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's a distinct honor and pleasure to appear before you today with my esteemed colleagues to discuss the Department of the Navy's tactical aircraft modernization and the critical role that the F-35 plays in that, as well as enabling our department's national defense strategy. With advanced fifth-generation capabilities being delivered through the implementation of agile development technologies and methodologies, the F-35 has turned a corner and now embodies both fleet modernization and acquisition innovation for our U.S. services, our 8 international partners, and our 4 foreign military sales teammates. I'm appreciative of your oversight, insight, support, and interest of the F-35, and look forward to continuing the discussions we began last month at our Tactical Aircraft Familiarization Panel. Since I last testified in front of this committee in March of 2018, the F-35 Joint Program Office has made tremendous progress across our 3 lines of effort of development, production, and sustainment, while continuing to enable successful operations for our U.S. services and international partners. Specifically, we completed our system development and demonstration flight test program. We delivered the full Block 3F capability with stable hardware and software. We made solid progress in fixing our Alice maintenance system and began initial operational test and evaluation. In production, we definitized the Lot 11 production contract with an $89 million F-35A, $115 million B, and $107 million C, all over 5 to 10% decrease over the previous production lot. We increased our U.S. services depot repair capacities in the United States. We activated the Italian maintenance repair, overhaul, and upgrade facility. And we established a credible cost per flying hour metric to get our hands around the ownership and operational costs of the F-35. We supported several U.S. Air Force theater support deployment packages. We conducted the first ever F-35 Charlie Air Wing integrated flight operations on the USS Abraham Lincoln. We successfully supported the United States Marine Corps' first deployments on the USS Wasp and Essex to include the first ever combat operations of the F-35B by the United States Marine Corps, and we supported numerous declarations of initial operational capabilities by our U.S. Navy, Italian Navy and Air Force, Royal Air Force and Navy, and just recently, the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, just to name a few accomplishments. As we look forward, as the program embraces an agile framework for continuous capability development and delivery, C2D2, to ensure we can deliver the Block 4 warfighting capabilities, as we ramp up the full-rate production with plans to deliver 131 aircraft this year, and as we get ready to achieve the 80% mission-capable rates for our combat fleets, the F-35 is now on track to be affordable and meet the needs of today's and tomorrow's warfighter. Of course, you've heard me say this before, F-35 is more than an airplane, and as you'll hear today, the modernization of F-35 is not limited to hardware alone. Rather, it's a combination of software and hardware, and the ability to collect, analyze, and share that data is a force multiplier that enhances all assets in the battle space. The F-35 is truly the quarterback of the joint force, and with stealth technology, advanced sensors, and weapons capacity and range, is the most lethal, survivable, connected, and interoperable fighter aircraft ever built. For the Department of the Navy, the convergence of stealth, aviation, and maritime capabilities found within the F-35B and C gives the United States Navy and Marine Corps combat attack flexibility and improves their ability to truly fight sophisticated enemy air defenses. This allows aircraft carriers and amphibious assault ships to maneuver and engage threats in highly contested environments. Today, with over 395 aircraft fielded, the F-35 is more affordable and lethal than ever before. However, I am not satisfied, and we can't be satisfied. We have to continue. We have to struggle. We have to tackle the challenges in front of us for the repair times, the spare parts postures, our production line flows, and the labor skills to ensure that we can reduce overall ownership costs. In cooperation with industry, we've established initiatives and tackling these challenges with a clear mandate to continue to drive affordability, quality, and reliability across the entire enterprise to meet that 80% mission capability rate, to drive below an $80 million F-35 unit price, and to truly obtain the $25,000 cost per flying hour target in 2025. Our President's budget FY20 requests the resources necessary to achieve these goals and funds the continuation of our innovative, agile development of critical Block 4 capabilities, supports the production of 78 F-35 air systems for our U.S. services, and ensures the required investments to operate and sustain over 660 F-35 air systems that are planned to be fielded at 22 bases and 7 sea-based locations by the end of FY20. On behalf of the men and women of the F-35 enterprise, you have my continued commitment to provide the accountability and transparency the taxpayer demands and the affordable, game-changing air system the warfighter needs. I thank you again for the opportunity to discuss the F-35 program and its role in the Department of Navy's modernization, and look forward to your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Hot mic. Where you go. Chairman Norcross, Ranking Member Hartzler, and distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to update you on the Department of Defense's 2020 Marine Corps Expeditionary Programs. I'm joined here today by Lieutenant General David H. Berger, Commanding General, Marine Corps Combat Development Command, and the Deputy Commandant for Combat Development and Integration. We look forward to your questions as we move through this morning. As stated by Secretary Spencer and the Assistant Secretary Gertz during previous hearings, the Navy and Marine Corps continue to face a dynamic strategic environment that's becoming ever more sophisticated, quickly evolving and pushing the envelope of conventional technology. Additionally, in the 2018 National Defense Strategy, in order to retain and expand our competitive advantage, it is imperative that we proactively work to meet these challenges and do so with a sense of urgency through new operational concepts and modernizing, resulting in overmatch. The Navy and the Marine Corps must remain ready at any time to respond to crisis and contingencies while simultaneously deterring adversaries' aggressions globally each and every day. Competing with a peer threat is the theme of our fiscal year 2020 budget submission. It directly aligns to the Secretary of Defense's guidance to increase lethality, improve warfighter readiness, and achieve program balance. In it, we prioritize investments so that our Marine Corps will evolve from today's 1.0 force to a near-term 1.1 modernized force that leverages select existing programs to achieve warfighting concepts, and ultimately a 2.0 future force with revolutionary capabilities required to create that competitive overmatch. In it, we have prioritized modernization programs that address command and control in a degraded environment, long-range and precision fires, operations in the information environment, air defense, protected mobility, enhanced maneuver, and logistics. These modernization efforts represent roughly 30% of the total PB20 budget submission. They are synchronized with the Secretary of Defense's national strategy, the Chairman's capstone concept for joint operations, and the Navy's distributed maritime operations concepts, and our expeditionary advanced base operations concepts. Through your help, we will continue the hard work to rebuild our readiness and modernize our Corps, with to maintain our competitive advantage against rising competitors. But we will need your help to do so. Again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before this committee today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you for each of your testimony, and we want to get right into questions and make sure our members have a chance. Admiral Khan, General Rudder, let's get right into the F-35, and let's talk about fourth generation versus fifth generation aircraft, the best mix. Over the course of the last few years, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion on fifth generation and how important that was moving forward. Yet we're legacy issues, primarily the fourth generation. Where do you see that mix today? And in light of some of the changes in the numbers of the F-35s being requested, what mix do you see that going to as a percentage and numbers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Marine Corps is going to be a fourth gen, fifth generation mix until 2030. And we decided to stay with our legacy Hornets and skip right into the fifth generation. We're going with a B and C mix because we still have a commitment to the Navy to not only deploy on carriers, but also do expeditionary operations. So we're going to buy, as you saw, we rebalanced this year with more Cs, just really more to catch up. Now that we have begun training our first F-35C squadron up in Lemoore, and we will be the second carrier deployment with the United States Navy with our F-35Cs, and we'll continue to support them with that as well. So that's the BC mix. With the fourth gen, fifth gen, our strategy has always been go from EA-6B to AV-8B to F-18 down to one type aircraft. And what that means is for our small 18 squadrons, expeditionary squadrons, both B and C, we'll build a mixed pilots back and forth between the B and C, one simulator, one maintainer, one supply account, and that creates efficiency for us. For us to stay with a fourth gen, we've got to keep a whole nother institution for a fourth gen fighter. So for fifth gen for us, one for the business model, one type aircraft is efficient and affordable. On the other side of things, as we...
Let me just drill down a little bit. So are you saying only fifth generation, 100%, when you're deploying? Because
after 2030, we will be...
Oh, after 20...
After 2030.
How about between now and then?
We will continue to be a fourth gen, fifth gen fleet out until 2030 with both Harriers going to probably 2028 and F-18s going to 2030, 2031.
So as a percentage, you are what now?
We are probably about 80-20 today, and we'll be 80-20 around the 2028 timeframe, but then 100% fifth gen by 2030 is our goal.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go finish.
I think the last thing I'll just say is, as we look at, for us, the Marine Corps being an inside force, and we are deployed forward as we are today. Even after we brought our first combat deployment back today, we have 10 F-35Bs on USS Wasp, and they're steaming around various parts of Asia as we speak right now. I think if you look at the competition from 2025 into 2030, fifth gen for us as an inside force will be what it will be required to win.
Thank you for the question, sir. Much like the Marine Corps, we will not attain a 50-50 mix until about 2030 based on the existing ramps that we have. Any additional resources?
The new ramps or the ones
as reflected in PB20.
Thank you.
Any additional resources that would be available from an F-35 perspective would provide us some buffer to meet our transition schedule as we get transition squadrons from Super Hornets into the Joint Strike Fighter. Right now, 1st Navy Squadron IOC'd VFA 147 in February. Next squadron transition as part of TAC Air integration will be a Marine Corps. Then it goes back to a Navy and continues to alternate through about 2026 or 2027. In terms from a warfighting perspective, because that is really what this discussion should be about. The 50-50 mix through 2030 with a Block 3 Super Hornet and with F-35s out there and with E-2Ds out there and with E-18G Growlers out there and with MQ-25 out there. I don't look at any particular aircraft capability. I look as the weapon system that flies off that carrier as a carrier air wing, because that is how we're going to fight. And what is the most lethality I can provide that is affordable and executable in the near term? And that is what our plan is. Anything beyond the Block 3 Super Hornet is a next generation air dominance discussion in terms of what is going to replace that aircraft. That AOA will be complete this spring. The final report will come out this summer, and that will inform future choices reflected in future budget cycles in terms of what do we need to do to get after the lethality that we need at a cost that we can afford.
Thank you. So, Admiral Warner, let's start talking about the supply chain for the F-35. The numbers that were originally planned were tremendously behind. We're not even close to that. But the ones that were part of last year's budget going into this year's budget have dropped a little bit. What does that do to your supply chain? Is that giving you the opportunity to get caught up with some of the problem areas of supply?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. The slight perturbations of U.S. service quantities across the recent years are really within what I call the margin of error for our growth phase. We're going from 66 aircraft that we delivered in 2017. We delivered 91 last year. We plan to deliver 131 this year, and we'll be at 167 by 2020. The slight inputs and decreases and increases are not having a drastic input on the purchase order demand on our supply chain, because we are also putting a big demand signal on them for spare parts for sustainment. And so as we look at the complete supply chain demand signal, the production and sustainment balance, we would have to see reductions of quantity measured in 40 or 50 in 1 year, or increase, to really put a reduction of demand on our supply chain.
So does that end up the delivery schedule? There's a difference between the two. So the actual delivery, is that being impacted at all? And the next thing we're going to want you to comment on, in the event that Turkey is no longer part of the supply team, how are you going to handle that?
Yes, sir. So the first question and the impact on the supply chain, what we're seeing right now is with the current demand on the 3,000 suppliers that provide parts to the production line and to our sustainment enterprise for spare parts, they are struggling with the demand signal on them, because they are producing parts for the production line, they're producing parts for spare parts for sustainment, and we still have them repairing their part for the ones that are breaking now that we have 395 aircraft deployed. So the strategy here is to take that demand signal of repairing the parts off of our industry and put it into our depots, our organic depots around the country, our fleet readiness centers and air logistics centers, so that our industry supply chain can truly focus on what they do best, which is generating new parts. What we're seeing is that the ramp up and the demand signal lagged from both Pratt & Whitney and Lockheed Martin to get the supply chain up the ramp from 66 to 91 to 131 to 167. And so we're starting to turn that corner, but we're still lagging. Right now, my production line at Lockheed Martin Fort Worth has on the average about 200 parts that are late every month. What that does is that pushes work down the production line, and we call it traveled work. Instead of stopping and waiting for the part to show up, we move it to the next station, and then they do that work at the next station. So there's a lot of extra management and extra touch and extra work that has to occur that's driving that price up and not necessarily seen by flow of the production line. The other part, right now, Turkey and my other 7 partners are all part of the supply chain, and they all have roughly a percentage of supply chain demand commensurate with the number of aircraft that they're procuring. Turkey is about 6%, 6 to 7% of our F-35 supply chain. Right now, there has been no disruption to the supply chain from any of my partners, to include the United States. And the flow we call the work in progress, WIP, that's flowing from Turkey, from my other partners, continues to flow to not only Fort Worth, but to Camry in Italy and Nagoya in Japan. Those are our 3 production lines. What we need to make sure is that any disruption to the supply chain, no matter where it comes from, we are putting in place the appropriate mitigation steps to mitigate potential disruption of the supply chain. I'll stop there, sir, to see if I answered your question.
You are, and I have a number of other questions, but I want to give the ranking member an opportunity. Mrs. Hartzler?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you are putting in place the mitigation efforts, but at this point, if Turkey were to stop providing that 6 to 7% supply chain, where would you be at?
So, ma'am, from any supply chain provider, we are between, we can do it in terms of aircraft or terms of time. The evaluation of Turkey stopping would be between 50 and 75 airplane impact over a 2-year period. From a timeline, we would see within 45 to 90 days an impact of the slowing down or stopping of those parts to the 3 production lines.
Okay. Thank you. I want to shift to physiological episodes, FA-18. So, Admiral Winter, I'll start with you. Should we be worried that over time, as we add more and more capability to the F-35, that at some point the air handling system of that plane won't be able to keep up? And what have we learned from the current F-18 situation to perhaps get out ahead of this so similar problems in the future don't happen with the Navy and the Marine Corps F-35s?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. The F-35 enterprise has been part of the entire Department of Navy and Air Force physiological episode team, the PET team, and has been there since day one, understanding the causal factors, the barriers, and the solutions, not only from an operational perspective, but more importantly, technical. The F-35 life support system already incorporates the lessons learned from F-22, F-18, and other F-15 and F-16 from an initial design elements in the middle of 2004 to 2005. F-35 has experienced, on average, the same or slightly less rate of physiological events that other aircraft have. Our solution space there is working with the aeromedical community, just like our Department of Navy folks, to do understanding the physiological events. But we've also incorporated three dedicated technical solutions to get ahead of any potential ramp of physiological episodes. In that, our oxygen generating system, we call it the onboard oxygen generating system, it's pronounced OBOGS, we found that it was providing the appropriate concentration of oxygen to our pilots, but there was a variation in it that if we reduce that variation would eliminate a potential causal factor. So we're incorporating that new logic to our OBOGs. There's a seat portion assembly that's in the seat of the F-35 that senses pressure, cockpit pressure, and other inputs, and will immediately initiate the emergency oxygen system to the pilot if it senses that the decompression or the atmosphere within the cockpit requires that. It was too sensitive. So we've gone back and looked at that based upon pilot input, and we're doing a seat portion assembly upgrade. And then finally, we have incorporated a carbon monoxide, so single CO, catalytic filter that does higher fidelity filtration of carbon monoxide, which the aeromedical community has determined is a first-order effect to physiological events. So those are all in work and will be in as the production baseline for Lot 12 and are being retrofitted into our previous jets. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It sounds like you're really taking the lessons learned and incorporating those. I was kind of concerned, though, when you said that they have the same rate of physiological episodes as the other aircraft, though, even with all of these changes. Are they already on there, or are they just, you're incorporating them for the future models?
So the OBOGs is OBOGs, and the SPA, the seat portion assembly, is early in the next quarter, and the COCAT, the carbon monoxide, is early next year. To your point about previous aircraft, what we're seeing from a physiological pilot population, more experienced pilots seem to have less incidences of physiological events. There's not a direct causal factor drawn by that. And so we're seeing our physiological events in our training aircraft over our operational aircraft, and they're the same design. Physiological events, first order effect is actual human being makeup as we go forward. Thank you, ma'am.
I know it's a very complex issue, and there's not one particular solution, and I appreciate your focus on trying to get a handle on this. And when I turn to Admiral Khan, I know you've been really focused on this as well. So can you kind of give some update on the numbers of reported PE incidents? Are they trending up or down? And can you describe for us how the Navy gets feedback from the PE event investigations back to the crew members and the pilots who experience them?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question. First, I would say we've taken over 20,000 samples of air that's coming out of the OBOG system, whether at T-45 or F-18, put it through the spectral analysis, and have determined that there is no contamination getting to that aviator. So we have ruled that out. All right, that's one. Two, for our T-45. You asked for numbers, ma'am. In 16, we had 35 incidents, 17, 31 incidents. Last year, we had 6. This year, thus far, this fiscal year, we've had 1. So that is progress. We've done it through straight lining, the pipes, if you will, that come off the engine that get to the OBOG's concentrator to provide constant flow, better flow to that piece of gear. And we've also increased flight idle RPM by 1.5%. Again, to get better flow to that cockpit, and that is what's driving those numbers down. For Hornets, it's different. You have A through Ds and Super Hornets, and I have both numbers. I'll talk to Super Hornet numbers. The primary driver to PE events in the Super Hornet is cabin pressurization and fluctuations that we're seeing. The rate that, or the incidents that we had for the Super Hornet, that's E, F, and G. So we include the growlers in this conversation. We had 87 incidents in 16, 73 incidents in 17, 65 incidents in 18. Thus far this fiscal year, we've had 41. Any progress we've made has flattened out. The good news is we know what we need to do in terms of using data analytics, working with Admiral Luckman, who's leading the Pete team, NavAir, things like the primary bleed air regulator valve, secondary bleed air regulator valve. We can connect that those systems are driving PE events. Some of those are under contract and we'll start delivering this year. Others will be, those gear will start delivering in 20, and we're going to install that on the airplane. CPOMs, if you heard about that, where it's the digital cabin altimeter, but it also measures the oxygen and be able to warn the aircrew. That is being installed this year and will continue being installed out through 20 until we outfit the fleet. So from a PE side, we've ruled out contamination. We've had the engineering to address the T-45. It is in place, and we've driven down numbers. From a Super Hornet side, we've kind of flatlined on the cabin pressurization, but we know what we need to do, and we're getting at it with respect to getting the items under contract, getting them in the aircraft, and until we do that, and we need the resources that we're requesting to do so, we're not going to make any significant change to these cabin pressurization. In terms of follow-on care, we have aviators that have numerous PEs or a couple PEs. We make sure that there's follow-on care and identified the resources with our medical community, whether it be in Portsmouth or out in the West Coast, and, to make sure that they have access to the specialists they need for any chronic symptoms that they're seeing.
Yeah. As far as the investigations, though, and getting that feedback back to the crew members and the pilots, how is that done?
Admiral Luckman is on the road as I speak talking to aviators. He was down talking to T-45 folks earlier in the week. He engages with Oceana for our strike fighters. He goes out to Lemoore and provide feedback, honest, transparent. This is what we're seeing. And I can say that for the young aviators down in Sinatra, they have complete confidence in the T-45 system now.
That's great. Well, appreciate all your ongoing efforts. We look forward to hearing the results of these changes you make and how it impacts us, hopefully, in the future. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Carvajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to all the witnesses, and congratulations again, General Berger, on your nomination. General Berger, the full rate production decision for the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, JLTV, has been delayed apparently due to issues with the visibility and limitations on how weapons can be fired from the vehicle. What is your assessment of the JLTV program status, current configuration, changes needed, and plans to resolve issues prior to a full rate production decision?
Thank you, sir. The vehicle, as it is right now, meets the Marine Corps requirements. The issues you spoke of and the reasons for the Army delaying a full rate production were not Marine Corps issues. They were unique to the Army. As a joint program, though, obviously, as they work their way through solutions to them, we'll be right next to the Army to see the changes that they make in the glass of the vehicle and the rest of the other two items. We'll see how that pans out in relation to cost. But we have already contracted for purchase the low rate production, about 1,600 of them this year. And then we'll wait for the full rate production and go from there.
Would this have an impact on the economy of scale reduced price that I assume you were projecting if the Army is going to buy a lot of less units of this vehicle?
If they reduce their overall buy, then certainly I think it would be like any other major system. There would be an impact on cost. So far, we have not seen that. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But this initial decision was just to postpone the full rate production.
Thank you, General. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you all being here today, and congratulations to the future Commandant. My first question is on electronic warfare. What is the current status of the next generation jammer, and how does the FY20 budget support this effort and electronic warfare and countermeasures initiatives in general? Thank you.
For the next generation jammer, the first aspect or capability we're looking for is what we call mid-band. That is fully funded. We had some challenges with respect to structure design that set us back a little bit, but we continued with the internals and the actual EW capability, and we are back on path to deliver that pod. The next aspect we're looking at is what's called low-band next-generation jammer. When you look at where potential threats are going, that's going to be a very important piece of equipment that we need to deny, delay, deceive. I'd probably keep it as simple as that in that high-end threat environment. And then there's also other aspects of EW on each particular airplane that is under my portfolio, but I'm not sure that was exactly your question. But the next generation jammer, when I say E-18G, I should say E-18G with next generation jammer. Okay. It's a system of systems between the two. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Considering rotary lift, my understanding is there's some pretty extensive infrared countermeasures. We don't have much in the radar countermeasures. Do we need to be doing more there, or what's your feedback in that area?
I guess there's always a threat that we need to keep pace with. And when it comes to aircraft survivability equipment, that is no different, whether it's a radar or weapon system. That is what we endeavor to do with all our assets. With the large aircraft infrared countermeasure right now that we're putting on our V-22 and on our 53 Echo, our KC-130s, and certainly some of our UC-35s and UC-12s, that will, for up to fourth generation threat, for those does a pretty good job. For the radar warning indications, we're always trying to keep up with the next generation of radar systems, and we're doing it with our F-18s as well, because every time we turn around, a new system has a new band that we need to deal with. But for our helicopters, certainly the new aircraft survivability equipment, the APRs, and certainly the AOQs are being designed to counter the new threat as it progresses.
I'm not sure who to ask this question to, but do you sense the OSD and the Joint Staff are providing adequate EW direction so we get a unified effort? Or is this sort of service-centric from your perspective?
Sir, I'll take a stab at that. I have a monthly a meeting with Dr. Bill Conley, who's the EW expert in OSD, and I believe that we're in lockstep, not from just a policy perspective, but an implementation perspective. And let me add one more thing on the next-gen jammer low band. It's currently in a demonstration phase. The expectation, and things are going well, the expectation is that system will leverage the Section 804 acquisition agility, I'll call it, to field that system as quickly as possible.
General Rudder, I understand you're procuring or requesting 2 MQ-9s for the Marines. Could you explain a little bit what's the intention there, and do you get much capacity with just 2 MQ-9s? I mean, I've been part of that with the Air Force and realized the huge network you have to provide a full-time cap. So just curious, what's your intention there with those 2 RPAs?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. The current MQ-9s right now are in a contract-owned, contractor-operated endeavor that we're doing. And quite honestly, we're in lockstep with the Air Force and how we manage that, because they're helping us with the network and how all this comes into being, especially for the area that it's operating out of. So one is, first and foremost, as we look at the future of Afghanistan and what Task Force Southwest is doing, is this is fulfilling an UNS for them. The purchase that we have in this year's budget allows us to buy these systems that we're already operating in a certain location, which is in a really good location, support Task Force Southwest, and do other things like networking and weapons that we can't do under the current contracting association. So first and foremost, to support the warfighter forward.
Okay. Thank you for your perspective. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Golden.
you, Mr. Chair. General Berger, congratulations again on the nomination. Yeah, I think I was telling you the other day I was having a conversation with a gentleman who was explaining to me his opinion that the high ground didn't matter on the battlefield anymore in an age with UAVs and other new technologies from the sky, which the grunt in me had a hard time contemplating, and I think you and I agree that's probably not 100% the case. But I thought it raised a good question, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about the work that you have in this budget and that the Marine Corps is working on in regards to air defense systems to protect our ground units, or even give them a little bit of an ability to reach out and fight back against something like a UAV, whether that just be eyes in the sky or even something that might be able to reach out and bite you. But certainly something I never had to experience, so I'm interested in knowing what's the Marines working on to make sure that our grunt units are able to compete with UAVs from above, or fighting with a peer competitor with fixed or rotary wing capabilities.
Thank you, Congressman. I'll start off and ask my teammate to cover ground that I perhaps miss. A couple things. First, the radar system called Gator that we use, started fielding last year and will continue fielding, is a huge advance for us in identifying, tracking targets as they come in, because it's expeditionary and it's electronic, it's phased array. So the Gator is part of the answer to your question. It's not just the shooting part, it's the first end. MADIS, acronym for the system that we have fielded in very limited quantities here in CONUS and probably will do overseas as well, is an integrated modular package on a Humvee or a JLTV vehicle that has everything on board one or two vehicles, including the power system. And that one initially kinetic, could be a directed energy solution for weapon system for it as well. And so far it's going pretty good in testing. We'll see where that goes. And in the longer range would be a medium range interceptor. Although not a core mission for us, we need to be prepared for that. And that development is ongoing as well. And I'll ask General Rudder, see if he can fill in holes for me.
I think your initial comment about the high ground is, as we put together the Marine Air Ground Task Force and the aviation and the ground elements that go into that, it's all dedicated on putting human beings, infantry, on the ground to seize objectives, forward objectives, as are stated in our advanced basing objectives and operations. So when we talk about this, we talk about the high-end fight. We get enamored by a lot of long-range systems, and we have to have those too, like the F-35. As we back down into that, right now, swarming quadcopters from enemy causes great concern. So we need to be able to do that. So in concert with what General Berger just talked about, whether it is another UAS that will take down that UAS, or whether it's directed energy, which has a lot of promise for this particular endeavor, having this full spectrum of capability to protect as well as stay on the offensive is all these things we're trying to piece together for the MAGTF. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you very much. And do you envision anything that might be man-portable for ground units?
You're talking beyond the Stinger sort of shoulder launch?
Yeah, anything coming down the road in terms of ability to engage with UAVs or anything like that?
I'll ask General Rudder. Not that I know of myself. I'll ask you if you know any.
We've got a lot of systems that will only offer that miniaturization in technology right now is providing a lot of capabilities for not only precision-guided munitions that can be launched and hover and loiter at great distances, but again, smaller UASs that can counter other UASs that we can certainly launch from a man-portable system.
Perfect.
If I could just, one more. We have done some experimentation with man-portable systems for low, slow, kind of smaller UAVs, and they have not panned out so far.
Appreciate that and interested in that. And the last thing I would say is, I continue to be interested in your new amphibious combat vehicle, and look forward to hopefully having the opportunity to get out there in the field and see one of those in action. And I think it's an important new investment that you're making, and critical to getting ready for you know, this whole national defense strategy in regards to China and the Pacific.
Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Rudder, we've heard a lot about the sustainment cost for F-35s, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding or misinformation about what the actual costs are versus the CAPE estimates. I understand the prime contractor has committed to a $25,000 cost per flight hour by 2025 for the F-35A variant. I also understand the Marine Corps has done its own analysis of what the actual operations and sustainment costs are currently for the F-35B. Can you share those numbers with us?
We have worked with the JPO, with CAPE, with Navy, with all the different cost estimators that determine what the ONS costs are going to be, and certainly costs per flight hour. And I think we've settled on how we quantify the costing, what we call, there's different categories, 1 through 5, manpower, fuel, sustainment, and the like. And we've settled on this, and I'll say for in 17, the actual costs, for 17, they were $60,000 per hour, and in 18, they were $51.3 thousand per hour. So some of that was due to we just didn't fly the numbers of hours that we had bought into, which creates, believe it or not, the less you fly, the higher your cost per hour is. If we look forward to FY19, we're striving to be at $39,000 per hour. The vectors, if all the things that Admiral Winters has talked about as far as getting maintenance closer to the flight line, getting some stability and sustainment, we believe that, you know, that $25,000 per hour is going to be achievable.
Could you compare that for a moment with other fifth-generation fighter aircraft?
I cannot compare it to other fifth-generation fighter aircraft, only the fourth generation that we have. And other fifth gen would be, I guess, F-22, and I don't have the numbers here, but certainly I can take that back to my Air Force.
Take that for the record?
Take that for the record.
Okay, moving on. I recently introduced the 5 Oceans Navy strategy, which proposes a force structure above the Navy's current 355 ship plan. The Navy we need blends a large force structure and advanced capabilities. In my view, deterrence is a critical component to our fight with near-peer adversaries in preventing large-scale conflicts. So, Admiral Khan, what is the role of unmanned aircraft, such as UAVs, in the future fight with near-peer competitors?
Well, we have Triton that's going to be going forward this year, probably later this summer. And we're going to continue to build capability capacity with that system in accordance and comply with the NDA of 2011, that I need the capability and capacity that I have greater than I have today before I can sundown the EP3 in 21, and we are on track to do that. MQ-25 is going to be the next big system that we put, and we're going to fly it off our aircraft carriers. It is primarily a tanker. It has some secondary capabilities of providing ISR. But the primary mission is a tanker. As I look to the future, I think to the past. I think the PBYs, the eyes and ears of the fleet, being out there at extended range, relaying information back to decision makers. I see that in the future of large UAVs flying off our carrier.
That's helpful feedback. General Berger, in your testimony, you spoke about the investments needed in manned, unmanned teaming and autonomous systems to facilitate sea control and denial. What capabilities and technologies do we need additional investment in to be competitive with our adversaries?
Just to make sure I understand, beyond autonomous, beyond, okay.
Yes, sir.
First off, thanks for the question. I would say our collective approach is not to match, but to gain overmatch, because a match is a kind of fair fight that General Dunford says we're never going to go into, and none of us do either. The manned-to-unmanned teaming you spoke of is hard work. We've found over the past year and a half, 2 years, very hard work to do. But actually, the teaming of that, younger Marines and soldiers take to it pretty easily. I think the longer term is going to be the depth part, either offensively or defensively in depth. In other words, conceivably, unmanned systems way far forward. Another unmanned system that can act as sort of a mothership on shore or on land. And then the manned portion and unmanned portion further back. In other words, a layering all the way out in great depth. I think the Navy's also making huge strides in subsurface, which we absolutely need to have in sea control and sea denial sort of roles. And lastly, I'll just say that the challenge for us is in the command and control, the fusion of all of that sensing when fighting operating as a naval expeditionary force, how to pull all that together, how to fuse it, and how to distribute it in a manner that the appropriate commanders can act on it.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here this morning. General Rudder, the funding for continued development of the KMAX unmanned helicopter was not included in the initial budget proposal, but was included in the unfunded priorities list. It's about $18 million. Again, the KMAX program in Afghanistan in 2011 flew thousands of hours, and I think they racked up a pretty good record of 4.5 million pounds of cargo for Marines in Task Force Southwest, which basically was the equivalent of about 900 convoys through pretty dangerous territory. So if Congress does agree to that unfunded request, can you discuss how the Marines would use that funding to continue research on heavy lift unmanned helicopter cargo lift?
Thank you, Congressman. We bought those KMAXs in a government-owned contractor-operated agreement in Afghanistan. When we came back, we endeavored to make them a program of record and are still working down that road, but we were not able to secure the funding to get that back flying in the fleet for test and operational usage for experimentation. We have since now, with the thanks really of this committee, to secure funding for that. So we have a cooperative research and development contract that we're working with KMAX, and they will take, in whether it's happening right now or in the next few weeks, they're going to be trucked back to Connecticut, and we're going to give them to the vendor to let them work through a couple different things. One is autonomous logistics delivery. Like we learned in Afghanistan, there is certain things that you want on call, but there's other things that you just need to have going autonomously. And I think the KMAX, with its lift capability and the way we conceive distributed operations in the future, if we get those airplanes, we're going to configure them as we're configuring this test vehicle back in Connecticut with autonomy, which will allow them to have terrain following type of radar, and it will be able to push a button. It will take the cargo to a particular point that you have programmed in. It will drop that cargo and do it all day long. And we've seen efficiencies with this over time. So with the money that we do have funded right now to do those 2 aircraft that we own back in Connecticut. We'll bring those back hopefully by the end of next summer to begin experimenting in human 20 Palms. But the extra money that's in there now is to create a few more air vehicles so we can kind of expand this usage, because we see this as the future of distributed operations, how we logistically supply ourselves.
Fairly modest request in Washington math. So again, I appreciate that answer, and hopefully that'll help us as we get closer to the mark. According to the Navy's long-term tactical aviation inventory plans, the Navy continues to maintain a mix of 4th-generation FA-18s and 5th-generation F-35s through the 2030s. Admiral Khan, can you talk about how you plan to integrate the F-35s with the legacy aircraft and carrier air wing during that transition period, and in particular, whether there's particular missions that you would select or prioritize for one type of aircraft over the other?
We've been doing this integration effort for a long time, working with the Air Force, working with the Marines, working out in Fallon, Nevada, with some of our young, disciplined, trained aviators that fly out of Top Gun or fly out of Strike. Those type of people are the people who need to do this work, and they are doing it in terms of how we're going to integrate this 5th-generation capability into the air wing. And in terms of some of the missions I see, as Emma Winter has suggested, the F-35 operating forward, acting as a quarterback. Sensing, collecting, reeling, in some cases killing various targets that are out there. But I also have trucks, known as a Super Hornet, that can carry a lot of ordnance, that the F-35 is out there sensing, relaying information to a long-range weapon and getting it on the target. Also working with the E-2D. Between the E-2D, the F-35C, the F-18 Super Hornets, the E-18G Growlers, when you put a fifth-generation asset in there, we just get better across all mission areas. If I had to go over the beach in some areas, it makes more sense to put a F-35 over the beach than a Super Hornet. Doesn't mean I can't put a Super Hornet over the beach, but the risk is a little bit different.
Great. Thank you. I may follow up with a written question after the hearing about just integrating also how you're going to maintain two different types of aircrafts, in the close space of an aircraft carrier. But again, I thank you for your answer.
Yes, sir.
This morning. I yield back.
Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today and for your testimony. I wanted to begin with Lieutenant General Rudder and talk specifically about the CH-53K King Stallion heavy lift helicopter. Last year we heard about how great this bird was going to be, the strongest, the smartest, the best heavy lift helicopter that money can buy. And now we're hearing reports that the initial operational capability milestones that are set for this December are not going to be met, that's going to have to be pushed back, that there are a whole list of elements there that have to be looked at. So the initial operation test and evaluation may not occur until 2021. There's a whole list of design deficiencies, and I want to point some of those out. The issues reported are airspeed indication anomalies, tail boom and tail rotor structural problems, low reliability for main rotor gearbox, fuel system anomalies, overheating of main rotor dampers, and hot gas impingement on aircraft structures. A list of ones that are, if you're a pilot such as the great pilots you have in the Marine Corps, and with your experience, those things are concerning about where we are with that. So my questions really are threefold. What's being done to correct those issues? What's in the pipeline? Is this year's budget request enough to make sure that we correct these design deficiencies? And as we're looking at the ability to deploy this helicopter, are we on track to deploy it in 2023, or is it going to be 2024? Because I think making sure we have that helicopter available to replace the Echoes is a key element. So I wanted to get your perspective.
Thank you, Congressman. And you're exactly right. It is important. Heavy lift is still really a DOD requirement and a Marine Corps requirement still, especially for distributed operations. This airplane, last year we moved it from testing in West Palm Beach, and we moved it to Pax River, where we put it through its paces. We brought it out to Colorado, did high altitude testing, we banged it around in the dirt out there, and we found some things. And we found some things because good Marine test pilots and Navy and the Naval Enterprise found things that needed to be fixed. So the delays that you see right now is to make sure we get it right. And I think I may even defer to Mr. Naga and talk about how we're negotiating the next few contracts. Is that we're going to build concurrency into our next contracts. So when the Marines get a helicopter, it's going to have those things. All the things you just talked about are going to be fixed before we give it to the fleet. If I back out from that, this aircraft did some unbelievable things this past year. It lifted 36,000 pounds. It still can go 100 miles, 27,000 pounds, 3 times what the 53 Echo can do. Now the question is to fix these technical deficiencies we have, and they're all fixable, and at this part of the program, and give the Marines, the maintainers especially, and our great pilots, the aircraft they deserve. But I think we're on the right track. You'll see where we put in this year's budget, we put what we need to fix as well as manage our procurement a bit to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves. But if you'll let us continue on with the money we've asked for this year and the money that we asked for next year, we're going to fix this, and we're going to deploy it in 2024.
Thank you. Lieutenant General Berger, first of all, congratulations on your nomination. We are excited about that, and I know that you will do a fantastic job, and we appreciate the great work that you've done throughout your Marine Corps career. I wanted to talk about munitions. And as you know, having munitions in the right places and the right types of munitions are a key logistical element there on the battlefield. And as I've had the opportunity to travel and talk to Marines forward deployed in those areas, many of the issues come up about having the right quantities of munitions in the right places and the right types of munitions. Can you give me an overview about where we are with the Marine Corps with having the right complement of munitions, having them in the right places and the right quantities?
I will, Congressman. Thanks for the question. And just to make sure, is your focus on small arms?
Yes.
Is this very good? Over the past, perhaps longer than 2 years, probably closer to 3 or 4, a whole lot of work done on the munition, the 5.56 round that we have to make it more lethal, and we've gone through several iterations of that with the Army. Parallel to that was a different type of cartridge that lessened the weight. To make it, carrying the same amount of rounds would be cutting the weight by maybe 2/3. Wow. The first one, on the lethality, I think the work so far between the Army and the Marine Corps is very solid. And the evolution of rounds that we used in Afghanistan kind of reflected that. There is a look again at the caliber to see if 5.56 is what we want as a service and as a Department of Defense, and I think all the right people are working on the answer to that question. Above that, all good things like rockets, where we've fielded MAWs in place of the SMAW, the medium machine gun 50 cal, kind of 7.62 and up to 50 cal, again, looking at a different type of cartridge that will lessen the weight and make it more expeditionary. I don't know where the decision point is. I'll ask on the caliber issue, but I do know it's one that both the Marine Corps and the Army are side by side on, and I don't know any as far as a timeline, sir.
Okay. We'll take the caliber, the timing for the record, the question for the record. We'll get back to you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
We're going to go through a second round of conversations, obviously fewer of us, and we're expecting votes, quite frankly, at any moment. General Berger, I want to give you an opportunity to give a more visionary or strategic view. For the Marine Corps Posture Review, identifies the Commandant's highest priority, command and control in a degraded environment. How does the Marine Corps FY20 request put you on a path to delivering this resilient, affordable C2 network?
Sir, thank you. The way that you described it is exactly why it's #1 for General Neller for the Marine Corps. We have a lot of sensing systems that we're fielding now and for the next couple of years. Our challenge as a naval force is how to integrate that and do it in a contested electromagnetic spectrum sort of environment. And that's not easy work because the mixture in just aircraft of 4th and 5th gen aircraft and pushing the processing and dissemination of that information really difficult. Hard enough to do if it wasn't in a contested environment, but we absolutely expect the threat to go after our C2 systems first, before logistics, before everything else, because they believe that's our Achilles heel. So for us, Navy and Marine Corps, it's #1 for the Marine Corps because if we can't have the network that we need, and we absolutely will, then you break the force down to individual small elements. It's going to remain #1 the rest of this year, and a fair portion of the request this year is aligned towards that, sir.
But as you move forward, obviously you're preparing for this in our new equipment. How are you dealing with it with the legacy equipment that we have?
Retrofitting is probably an idea that only the last few years we have started writing it into requirements in the way we probably should have all along. But it wasn't so necessary. Now it absolutely is. For example, we have 117 Gulf and Fox radios. Retrofitting them is difficult work. Retrofitting a Humvee, hard work. The M1A1 tank It's analog, not digital. Oh, in some of the legacy systems, there's a point we reach, like with the M1A1, where you cannot go any farther, or the LAV. The ACV, the combat vehicle that we're starting to field, baked into it, built into it. But for the legacy systems you mentioned, sir, some will be bolt-on, kind of aftermarket work, and some will be in a separate system that does the fusion between legacy analog into a digital 5th gen.
Have you done a scrub down of all those systems to see, you know, this comes down to what you do is making these tough decisions. What risk are you able to take on? How much of an investment into our older equipment versus accelerating some of our new ideas?
We have, sir, and in the budget that was submitted, you'll see cancellation of some legacy programs that we're going to upgrade C2 systems in favor of a more modern platform.
Thank you. Mrs. Hartzler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Berger, I wanted to add my congratulations along with my colleagues on your new role. Look forward to working with you. And have a question for you and Mr. Smith. As you know, the Army is rapidly developing the next generation capabilities with respect to long-range precision fires, combat vehicles, future vertical lift programs in the fiscal year 2020 budget. I was wondering what are you doing to develop and invest in these next generation capabilities, and how are you coordinating with the Army in these initiatives?
Well, ma'am, let me assure you that we are closely tied to the Army. They're a much larger force, and they're already working on things. They have a larger budget, and the Marine Corps benefits greatly from leveraging and working together as a combined force. There is no daylight between us when it comes to the capability that we're working to extend forward, modernization efforts, and bringing forth new technology. We have joint programs in the joint tactical vehicle where we're working great together with one another. So that synergy continues.
That's great. As far as the Block 4 modernization with the F-35, you've committed to a significant amount of funding to support this initial Block 4 modernization, but as I said in my opening statement, I think there's some concerns with the projections going forward with the idea that every 6 months there's going to be this big leap as the cost. So how can you assure us and the taxpayer that Block 4 modernization program won't follow in the footsteps of the F-35's baseline program, which saw significant cost and schedule growth during its development?
Thank you, ma'am, and it's a great question. So we start with the maturity of hardware and software of the Block 3F, and the Block 4 takes the warfighting capabilities that were identified by our services to address the pacing threats through 2025. And we looked at the Block 3F to see where the modernization, enhancements, and improvements needed to be made to stay in front of that threat. It's not a clean sheet of paper. The airworthiness and the outer mold line, the majority of that all the structural work that was truly some of the unknowns over the Block 3 and the earlier development has all now at a maturity level. What we see for Block 4 capability is about 80% software modernization of current fielded software and 20% enabling hardware that will not change the outer mold line of the aircraft, will not drive additional airworthiness testing in the same way, in the manner, and the capacity that we had in Block 3.
That makes sense.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
It makes sense. I've heard the bell, so I say, are we voting right now? Okay, just a couple quick other things. As you know, Secretary Mattis had the 80% mission capable rate as the goal. And I was wondering if you could just kind of give us an update on where we're at on the readiness rate of our aircraft.
For Super Hornets, ma'am, I'll keep this brief because I know there's a tight timeline. We have invited industry, asked industry to come out and assess our processes at our squadrons, at our depots in California, and our intermediate activities. We've reduced planned maintenance intervals in Super Hornets from 120 to 60 days. And not only did we cut it in half, the quality of the product that's coming out of that PMI event is that much better, and the aircraft is flying within a week from that PMI event, in some cases 4 days. We're trying to reduce our 84-day inspections down to 3 days. We've looked at treating artisans that do these PMI events and repair repairables as surgeons. Surgeons don't leave the patient and don't leave the operating room in the middle of a procedure. You plan the event, you know the resources you require, and you keep the artisan focused on that effort. So those are just a few of the things. What are the results? The MC rates we see as a volatile stock market right now. The highs are getting higher, the lows aren't going as low, but the vectors are going in the right direction. We've seen anywhere from 63% MC rates, that's a snapshot in time on a given day, to 76% MC rates, a snapshot in time on a given day, and they fluctuate in between. We need to understand what's causing that variance, fix what we can to maximize the peaks, minimize the valleys, and keep the vector going in the right direction.
Great. Admiral Winter, want to get the F-35 rate?
Yes, ma'am. Similar to Admiral Khan, we've identified the root causes and the levers needed to ensure the availability and the mission-capable rates for the F-35. We look across our entire fleet and we've taken a full system look. We need to make sure that we have increased spare parts on the flight line. We need to make sure we can repair parts, so we're accelerating the depot stand-ups in the United States. And we've pushed flight line maintenance authorities to our warfighters on the flight line where they had to send back parts or send back to get the maintenance completed. They can now do those actions on the flight line. Those three have and will continue to increase the availability and the mission-capable rates of our F-35. What we look at right now with a snapshot of our combat-coded fleet, we have the F-35A is 61%, F-35B is 64%, and the F-35C is 84%. When we deploy and we provide afloat spares packages and deployed packages, those mission capability rates average between 65 and 85% as we move forward.
That's great. I am concerned that you said that Lockheed Martin, they have 200 part shortage every month. So I'm glad that you're getting after the parts and focused on this. I think we'll go ahead and stop, but thank you very much.
Just a quick interjection because I might have picked up on it incorrectly. General Rudder, you were talking about the sustainment cost, and you alluded to that when we came to a set of criteria that you were including in that. I'm paraphrasing. Are the criteria that you take into account to come up with the sustainment cost different than other service branches, or is there continuity across the board?
Every service computes their costs a bit differently, but with the F-35, we have come together with CAPE, the JPO, and the Navy, and we were on the same sheet of music as far as computing costs. But in the very beginning, we were including some things, not including other things, but we've now, in the past year, quite it's been about a year now since we've come together, and we are all on the same sheet of music when it comes to those criteria that we're including for the cost.
We're comparing apples to apples. Mr. Golden, do you have any questions? Mr. Whitman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question for Rear Admiral Khan. As we look at where we are today in great power competition, the debate back and forth has been how do we maintain and in some areas create a larger delta between our adversaries and ourselves because we want them to remain near peers. But as we look at where we're coming with the deliberations back and forth about the remaining 2 years of the Budget Control Act of 2011, the potential of sequester is there. And you had talked about modernization, how critical modernization is, not only with current aviation platforms, but making sure that we get the new F-35 on board. And Admiral Winter, I know you talked about that too. So I wanted to get your perspective about where does the Navy see themselves if sequester were indeed to come back as far as modernization, and where does that leave the United States in relation to maintaining and in some instances trying to enhance, still keeping our adversaries as near peers?
if we go back to sequestration levels, that'll drive us back to making false choices between readiness and modernization, which is in some cases why we're sitting where we are today. There's a lot of programs we have both today to keep them ready or to modernize them, let alone all the things we have to do in the future. Every aircraft in Sinatra must be replaced by 2035. The E-6B has a pretty important mission. I have to recapitalize that. C-130, I mean, the list is long. And SLM, Service Life Modernization, for taking a Block 2 into making it a Block 3 Super Hornet. You know, we're finally at a place where we're buying more aircraft, either F-18 Block 3s, F-35Cs, and when you add up the SLM efforts and number of aircraft we're going to pump out, where we're delivering more aircraft than we're burning up each year, which allows us to now get out of some old legacy systems, get rid of the F-18Ds, A through Ds, give breast to breathe the Marine Corps, drive down cost across the force. That would cause some significant challenges, and we always have hard choices to make. The choices would get that much harder in terms of being able to provide the force that's going to fight and win in that high-end environment. That would be at risk.
Very good. Vice Admiral Winter, any thoughts on that?
I see the F-35 stays at full sprint in development with our modernization, full sprint in production to 2044, and full sprint as we go from 395 air systems to 1,200 air systems just over the next 4 years. Any reduction or substantial reduction to funding amounts in development, production, or sustainment will have considerable impact and will erase all of the initiatives and all of the gains in affordability that we've worked so hard to gain, and we're on the precipice here. My biggest concern across the F-35 is truly my supply chain management. And any disruption to the supply chain, be it self-imposed or otherwise, will have a direct impact in the ability to produce airplanes and sustain them. And then my warfighter is not going to need to modernize them because he's not going to buy them.
Gotcha. Very good. Lieutenant General Rudder?
When you all really put in and helped us in the budget lane to begin investing on our readiness accounts fully, and while certainly modernizing. And for the Marine Corps, we are transitioning our complete fleet. So just an example for the FRCs, our depots. In the past few years, the depots have hired back 2,700 artisans and engineers and a workforce, and we're catching up with our depot. Aircraft are coming out, and they're flyable, and they're a great product. Our spares accounts now, we've now fully funded our spares accounts. This year for the F-18 alone, we will reap the benefits of $1.6 billion of spares that we were able to put in for those accounts, while all at the same time supporting the NDS and buying new airplanes, F-35, CH-53K. We're going to finish off our V-22 buy and our KC-130 buy here in the next few years. So to do that, we go back to the competition and balance. And we have committed at this table to fully fund our readiness accounts. And if we stay committed to that in a sequestration-like event, that means that something's going to give in our modernization accounts. Yeah. Today, the budget that we have set forward allows us to balance readiness as well as modernize. And to compete in this world, I think we're going to need to maintain that for quite some years to catch up. Thank you, Congressman.
Lieutenant General Berger, your perspective, I know you have a much broader perspective outside of the aviation realm, but also across all Marine Corps operations.
I would agree with what was already said, Congressman. Okay. We would triage just like you would any patient. You would absolutely make sure that the next units that are deploying and the ones who are already deployed have everything that they need. You're not going to take anything away from that. Mm-hmm. You're going to hurt research and development. You're going to cut that. We would cut the modernization way down, because what we can't have is a carrier strike group or ARG-MU go out anything less than 100% ready. So we would triage the patient, cut off modernization, reduce research and development, do whatever we needed to do to make sure that the units that were on the slate to deploy are ready.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and if it was up to the Armed Services Committee, we wouldn't have the problem. It's a matter of those who aren't in this room who need to hear it. Just want to follow up with one item and what the line of questioning from Mr. Whitman on the CH-35K. General Rudder, for the record, can you talk about any new contract that you might enter into, how it will address the deficiencies and any potential ones?
We're endeavoring right now to enter into a contract that addresses all the deficiencies as well as any new deficiencies as part of the delivery of that aircraft.
That a contract might include a set aside for any future unseen issues?
It could.
Yes, sir, let me jump in. There's an expectation, and we're in negotiations right now with Lockheed. There's an expectation that on that LRIP contract that there's a risk sharing that goes on there. So for any new discovery, that risk will be shared by the contractor.
So it sounds like that Lockheed, who is at risk here, if they enter into that, understands that by now they should have found any major issue.
The flight envelope's been tested to the corners. General Rudder talked about how we've wrung it out. There's a relatively low risk that anything major will be found. However, if nuisance issues come along, we're not going to give those nuisance issues to the Marines, and the Navy Marine Corps team is not going to accept the full risk of that. So the risk concurrency between the development and the production, that overlap is going to be taken care of.
But that's the cost risk. We still have the time risk.
Correct.
Thank you. Mrs. Hartzler, any other questions? Any closing statements? We want to thank all the witnesses for working with us today, and perfect timing, votes are being called. We are adjourned. Thank you.